and the single-stranded basal segments. On top of these common structural elements, there are some frequently occurring sequence motifs, such as UG motif at the basal junction, UGU or GUG motif at the apical junction, and CNNC motif at the third-line side of the basal segment. These are recognized by microprocessor and its co-factors. So recent models suggest that microprocessor is a primary complex of 360 kilodalton, with 2 PGCRA copies and 1 ROSA in the complex, and they together recognize the whole length of pi microRNA. ROSA sits on the basal side of the stem, recognizing the UG motif, whereas PGCRA sits on the upper side, recognizing the upper stem plus apical loop with UG motif. So the structure of ROSA has recently served in the lab, and it supports the model previously proposed, showing that indeed this complex is a heterotrimeric complex, and ROSA recognizes at the basal side of the stem, measuring the 11 base pairs from the junction. So how is pi microRNA processing regulated? As I mentioned, ROSA is important for microRNA biogenesis, and it's a very highly selective gatekeeper for the canonical microRNA biogenesis pathway. So this step serves as a hotspot for the regulation. And there can be 2 different modes of regulation. Firstly, by using RNA binding proteins and RNA modifying enzymes that selectively recognize certain groups of pi microRNAs, or by using modulators of the microprocessor on the protein side. So there are a number of examples, but just to mention a few. Link28 interacts specifically with the left family to block pi microRNA processing. KSRT is another example of RNA binding protein that interacts with the loop. ADAR1 edits the stem of the RNA to interfere with processing. EDX proteins, Deadbox helicase proteins, and SR proteins seem to interact with the single-stranded region of pi microRNA. Microprocessor protein can be targeted as well by phosphorylation or acetylation or ubiquitination. MECG1 directly interacts with PGCRA to interfere with microprocessor assembly. Next step is to export free microRNAs by exportin 5. Exportin 5 structure is like a baseball mitt, which holds free microRNA using its basic internal surface. And it also has a basic tunnel-like structure at the bottom, which specifically interacts with the 3' overhang of the RNA. So it has the features that can specifically interact with the structure of free microRNA generated by ROSA. RANGCP is a cofactor for exportin 5, which allows to make this transport complex. Once the free microRNA is in the cytoplasm, it is cleaved again by another enzyme, DICEL. DICEL also functions as a molecular ruler by measuring 22 nucleotides from the end of the RNA. DICEL, just like ROSA, has a couple of RNA3 domains at the C-terminus and double-stranded RBD. It also has additional RNA binding fuller domains, TARS, and another RNA binding domain. Using the helicase domain at the N-terminus, DICEL interacts with its cofactor, TRDP, and also interacts with the hairpin, the loop of free microRNA. So the structure of DICEL has been best studied using a DICEL homologue from Giardia, a primitive form of eukaryote. It shows that DICEL uses its TARS domain to interact with the 3' end of free microRNA, and the RNA is extended through the surface of the protein so that RNA3 domains can make a cut at a certain position. A more recent study on the fragments of human DICEL shows that human DICEL has 2 basic pockets in the TARS domain, which can bind to both the 5' and 3' ends, explaining the molecular basis of the overhang interaction and the measuring mechanism for DICEL. Free microRNA processing can also be controlled by RNA binding proteins and RNA modifying enzymes, as well as by modulators of DICEL protein. Exonucleases like MC-PIG1 and IRE1 alpha can cleave free microRNA to negatively control biogenesis of certain microRNAs. Lipid can act on some free microRNAs to control the expression. Link28 can bind to free microRNA to induce terminal uridine transferase activity and induce decay by this VL2. DICEL interacts with a cofactor called TRGP, which helps ROSA to accurately recognize the cleavage site and diso or TIVT can be regulated by phosphorylation and other factors. So the last step of microRNA biogenesis is to make discs out of the RNA duplex generated by diso. Duplex is loaded onto Argonaute to make discs. To explain it to you a little bit about Argonaute, they have very conserved T domains. In this structure, the mid domain binds to the 5' end of microRNA. The pass domain interacts with the 3' end of microRNA. Chili domain is localized at the center of the protein. And in the case of mammalian ARGO2, Chili domain forms an active site that cleaves the target mRNA that base pair to this microRNA. The formation of WISC is actually composed of two steps. First, to load duplex onto Argonaute. This requires some chaperone proteins HSD70 and 90, which induces large conformational change to Argonaute by using ATP hydrolysis. The next step is to remove the passenger strand or microRNA star sequences, usually by unwinding of the duplex. When you load the duplex to Argonaute, the loading is asymmetric in a fixed orientation in a way that the less stable end of the duplex is bound to the mid domain. So the 5' end is inserted into a pocket in the mid domain. In the loading step, the strand to be selected is already determined. So with that, the WISC formation completes the microRNA biogenesis pathway. Once WISC is formed, this complex is very stable, and small RNA, the microRNA has a very long half-life. But in some biological systems and developmental stages, the microRNA half-life can be shortened and they turn over faster. And it was shown that in C. elegans, actually ribonucleases hexarin 1 and 2 are involved in fast turnover of microRNA. And it was shown that the adenylase WISC can modulate microRNA stability by adding additional A to the 3' end of microRNA in embryos and oocytes. CAN1 is an methyltransferase that adds methyl groups to the 3' end of microRNA. This works particularly for plant microRNAs to stabilize microRNAs. There are also some modulators of the Argonaute to control its activity and stability and localization through hydroxylation, phosphorylation, and poly-ADP ribose polymerization. So far, I have explained to you how canonical microRNA can be generated through the microRNA pathway, which involves Pol2, DOJA, X-protein 5, diso, and Argonaute. This canonical pathway explains the vast majority of microRNA biogenesis, particularly those that are conserved and abundant. But I also want to point out that this pathway can be used partially to generate alternative biogenesis pathway, and some microRNAs, non-canonical microRNAs, can be generated by using some of the vectors that I mentioned, but also using additional vectors. So this was the first part of my talk. In the second part, I will explain to you how RNA modification called decaling can control microRNA biogenesis and messenger RNAs. Thank you for joining me today. Hi, I'm Mary Kim from RNA Research Center at IBS. I also work at Seoul National University. In the last part of my presentation, I talked to you about how microRNAs are generated and regulated. In this talk, I will talk to you about a type of RNA modification called decaling, which controls microRNA biogenesis and other types of RNAs, including messenger RNAs. So, more than 100 types of RNA modifications have been described so far. RNA modification can be on the base or the ribose residues. Additionally, the nucleotides can be added to or removed from RNA. My lab has been particularly interested in the 3' part of the RNA, which we call tails. In this presentation, I'm going to show you some of the data from the lab that demonstrates that sometimes a tail can actually change the fate of the RNA. So, This line of the study began when we were studying the microRNA pathway. As I explained to you in the first part of the talk, microRNA biogenesis involves SPOR2, DOSA, exportin 5, DISA, and Argonaute. And mature microRNA are thought to be a single species. But in fact, if you look at the deep sequencing data, here on the left, the numbers indicate the relative abundance of the microRNA species. Apart from the most abundant reference sequence, you can also find additional isoforms. Most notably, some isoforms have no templated A sequences or U sequences at the end of the microRNA. In animals, A's and U's are the most common untemplated nucleotides at the very final end of the RNA. In plants, U is the most prominent one, as originally described by Jermaine Chancellor. So where are these untemplated nucleotides come from? It turns out that uracilation takes place mostly prior to DISA processing on pre-microRNA, whereas adenylation occurs after DISA processing on affinity nucleotide RNA. So these reactions are carried out by a group of non-canonical poly-A polymerases, also known as terminal-phosphorase. Out of the 7 non-canonical poly-A polymerases or subcases, TUP4 and TUP7, which have very similar domain organizations, have redundant functions in the uracilation of PRELEC7. And about adenylation, it was shown that TUPase2 or GOLD2 or WISP and FLICE are responsible for adenylation. But before I begin to explain the regulation by tailing, I want to make clear that the tailing frequencies are generally quite low in most cell types for most microRNAs. So I want you to have an impression that tailing is always important for all microRNAs. However, the tailing frequency varies depending on microRNA species and cell types, and tailing can provide a molecular basis for the regulation of some microRNAs in a specific developmental stages. So to give you a couple of examples of tailing-mediated regulation, first one is uracilation of PRELEC7. There are actually at least 2 modes of uracilation of PRELEC7. First one is monouracilation. This is mediated by TUPase7 and 4, and monouracilation actually promotes DISA processing. So in this context, TUPases promote PRELEC7 biogenesis, serving as a biogenesis factor. But then, this is the case of differentiated somatic cells. But in embryonic cells and cancer, an RNA binding protein called LINK28 is expressed, and it binds to PRELEC7 and interacts with TUPases to induce oligouracilation. So now the long U tail is inhibitory to DISA processing and further promotes decay of the RNA. So under this situation, TUPases, the same enzymes, can serve as a negative regulators. So there is a functional duality in uracilation depending on the length of the uricylated tails and the context of RNA and cell types. By doing this, LINK28 and TUPases can provide a molecular switch in the developmental and pathological transitions, such as in cancer. The second example is adenylation of mature microRNAs. If nodal blotting from Drosophila eggs and embryos, you can find some heterogeneous microRNA population, which indicates adenylation of mature microRNAs. These adenylated isoforms disappear when the embryo moves to its developmental stage later. It turns out that the same pattern is observed in other animal species, such as in sea urchin and mouse, suggesting that this is a conserved mechanism. We later found that an enzyme called WISP, a non-canonical poly-A polymerase, is specifically expressed in eggs and induces microRNA adenylation. This is a mutant of WISP gene, and here microRNAs accumulate as an unmodified form. So we found that microRNAs are dynamically controlled during late oogenesis and early embryogenesis. Maternal microRNAs are deposited and then they are degraded rapidly during development, while the zygotic microRNAs are induced from the zygotic genome to replace the population. The mechanism underlying this regulation is mediated by a WISP, which adenylates microRNA to induce rapid decay. So WISP-mediated adenylation may contribute to the clearance of maternal microRNAs during this interesting dynamic developmental transition period. So I have explained to you so far, in animal systems, there are uracilation as well as adenylation that control the fate of a certain group of microRNAs in specific cell types and developmental conditions. So moving on to other pathways, mRNAs are also known to have tails, canonical poly-A tails. But we were curious if there is any other types of non-canonical tails on mRNAs. We were also curious if we could investigate the function of these tails by measuring poly-A tail length at a genomic scale and at high resolution. The other methods such as nodal blotting and microarray have been developed, but the resolution and the scale was not good enough to look at transcriptome essentially. So we developed a technique called the KSA, which is to sequence the 3' terminal. Just to briefly explain to you the protocol, total RNAs were enriched with mRNA by size fractionation and ribosomal RNA depletion. This was ligated to the 3' adapter that contains biofilm residues, so that after partial digestion, we can pull down the 3' most fragment by using strep targeting beads. The fragment was then ligated to 5' adapter and further amplified by Pi6CR, and we carried out tail-gender sequencing. You get 51 nucleotides from read 1 and 251 nucleotides from read 2. Read 1 is used to map the RNA to get the identity of the transcript, and read 2 is used to determine the K sequences. Using this method, we could precisely determine the very end sequences of RNA. But one challenge that we had was because of the homopolymeric nature of poly-A tail, if you go deep into the tail, the sequencing quality becomes really bad, so it was very difficult to get the sequences right. To overcome the problem, we collected the fluorescent signals directly from the sequencing reaction and looked at the images from the sequencer and noticed that there's a transition between poly-A sequences and non-poly-A sequences. And we could convert the information to calculate relative T signal, and it gave us to determine the state of the sequence to call for the poly-A tail length. So we were able to measure accurately the poly-A tail length of mRNA. So this was quite useful, and let me show you some examples of tail repeats. These are the random reads that match to the P53 mRNA. As I said, this is a tail-gender sequencing, so from read 1, which is shown in blue, are used to get the identity of the transcript. And then read 2 is used to learn about the sequences of the tail. From this data set, we could determine precisely the poly-A tail length of the mRNA. In addition, we could, of course, look at the 3' end of RNA to find some interesting terminal modifications, such as uracilation and even guanylation. So tail-seq is very useful in studying the regulation of poly-A tail. Shown here is an example, is the tail-seq data from photocell lysate and PABP immunoprecipitate. PABP is on poly-A binding protein. On the x-axis, you have poly-A tail length, and y-axis, you can see the fractional polyps. This is a duplicated experiment, and you can see that input or photocell lysate gives very reproducible results. And from this distribution, you can learn that the median poly-A length is typically between 60 to 100 nucleotides in mammalian messenger RNAs, which is shorter than previously anticipated. You can also learn that PABP, as you would expect, binds preferentially to long poly-A tails. PABP is known to span 25 nucleotides, so on average, a poly-A tail can accommodate only 2 to 4 PABP molecules. You can also use this technique to study the 3' end modification of mRNA. For instance, you can study utilization of mRNA. We were actually quite surprised to see such widespread distribution of utilization on mammalian mRNAs. This suggests that perhaps utilization is an integral part of mRNA life cycle. And given that mRNA utilization was observed from individual mRNAs from fungi and plants before, this study collectively indicates that this process may be conserved in eukaryotes. To find out the function of utilization, we searched for the enzymes that are responsible for utilization and found that protease 4 and 7 regulate mRNA utilization. If you knock down protease 4 and 7 in HeLa cells and carry out case experiments, utilization frequency is reduced substantially, particularly the oligonuclease. So what's the functional consequence of these enzymes? To find out, we knocked down H4N7 and treated the cells with actinomycin G and carried out RNA-seq experiment to measure the stability